It's your number one queen, and I'm going to say what I need to say instead of making you read. I go day by day, never regretting a thing. This is my true life, and I live it like a king. I have real relationships, even with guys. But you can't fool me now because I can see through all of your lies. Money is an object, and it can give you a high. But at the end of the day, love conquers all, and then you die. So listen when I say I don't live life like I'm bored. I always step up my game, and I refuse to be ignored.
Loud, bold, unapologetic. The Jersey Shore aesthetic is impossible to forget. While it emerged with the show's debut in 2009 and declined after its final season in 2012, it is closely tied with the Italian-American youth subculture Guido, which existed long before the show. Just a couple of disclaimers before I start this video. Firstly, I just want to say that I'm a little bit apprehensive to use the term Guido in this video, as I understand that it's still considered offensive by some Italian Americans. I have chosen to use it basically because of its prevalence in the show, in pop culture, and in academic research. But I really hope it's clear I mean no offense by it, and it's just for learning and discussion purposes. Secondly, I am in no way an expert on Italian American culture. My understanding of this aesthetic is based off academic research and journalist articles that I'll mention as I go. But obviously keep in mind that there's only so much you can learn about a culture from books. Nevertheless, I will try and break down what I've learned for you in an unhinged amount of detail, because what else are we here for? Background. To try and understand the Jersey Shore aesthetic, I've been trying to understand what is Guido style and how it ended up on MTV. Dr. Donald Tricarico is an Italian-American sociology professor with over 40 years of research on the Guido subculture. In his book, Guido Culture and Italian-American Youth, he proposes that Guido style represents a departure from any working-class identity associated with Italian Americans through the capitalist consumption of broader American culture. He traces the roots of the Guido subculture back to the 70s disco scene in New York, epitomized by characters like Tony Manero from Saturday Night Fever. Guidos in the outer suburbs, like Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, were known for their charisma, their love of disco dancing, stylish attire, intense beauty regimes, and womanizing. For those of us who've seen Jersey Shore, this kind of sounds familiar, right? But there are also similarities in 1970s disco Guidos to earlier Italian-American subcultures, such as the 50s Greasers, known for their love of cars and motorcycles, and a territorial and sometimes violent street code. While 70s disco Guidos were also known for a love of cars and being territorial about their disco clubs, Tricarico notes important differences. Greasers, largely the children of first-generation Italian immigrants, were typically from working-class backgrounds, drawn to working-class labor-related activities like mechanics and working-class coded styles. 70s Guidos and Guidettes, on the other hand, had more disposable income, which allowed them to embrace hedonistic American disco culture, its extravagant fashion, beauty trends, and debauched nightlife. This, according to Tricarico, enabled Italian-American youth to transcend any previous working-class stereotypes associated with their ethnicity. Then in the 1980s, many urban Italian-Americans migrated to suburban areas of places like Long Island, New Jersey, and so on. Italian-American youth now congregated in suburban malls and gyms, and with more disposable income than ever, they consumed more American culture than ever. This enabled Guido to flourish, and by the 2000s it was a prominent subculture that was making its rounds on social media. Guidos and Guidettes were transfixing people on blogs and MySpaces. It was the tanning, it was the extravagant fashion, it was the glamorous Guidettes, it was the muscles, it was the hair, it was the posing, it was the Italian ethnicity, and having more disposable income than any previous generation of Italian Americans. It was the flaunting of consumption. But they also had unique elements distinguishing them from other subcultures, such as a continuation of the Greasers' love for cars and motorcycles, and a carry-on of disco's passion for partying and nightlife. Blogs at this time, such as NewJerseyGuido.com, showcased their partying lifestyle in summer hotspots like Hampton Bays and Seaside Heights to a broad audience, and a 2003 article by the Washington Post described them in these areas as the spiritual descendants of John Travolta's Saturday Night Fever. It was in these areas that the concept of summer share houses, a tradition of renting a house with friends over the summer to party and hook up, became a core component of the subculture. Now, Tricarico notes that Italian-American youth subcultures have historically faced marginalization from broader American society. Greasers were often stigmatized as deviant, while disco Guidos of the 70s were frequently excluded from Manhattan clubs. In the 2000s, the subculture faced intense ridicule online, labeling Guidos as lower class, trashy, unintelligent, and cringeworthy. And this was all happening at the absolute peak of reality TV's popularity. Several American cable networks, including MTV, which had historically been known as a music video programmer, changed to feature almost all reality TV. A growing trend in this genre was shows that encouraged a kind of hate watching, mostly through sensational or highly controversial moments. And MTV had kind of mastered how to hate watch youth culture, with shows like My Super Sweet 16 or Rich Girls. The Guido was a natural fit for this moment in reality TV, with their sensational style and partying habits, and the negative attention this was garnering them online. Networks naturally began trying to make shows about Guido. MTV's True Life series and A&E's Growing Up Gotti both took a shot, but nothing really hit until Jersey Shore. The show documented the summers of 9 housemates in Seaside Heights, and with the Guido antics, the charismatic personalities, the relationship drama, the messy hookups, the wildly controversial moments, this show was a cultural phenomenon. While it was largely considered the epitome of lowbrow trashy TV, by season 2 it was also the most watched show of people aged 12 to 34, and it peaked in season 3 as MTV's highest rated series ever, spawning many successful spin-offs. All the cast either identified as a Guido or Guidette, or aligned themselves in some way with the subculture, and so it was integral to the show, being defined in the very first moments of the pilot. The show's popularity meant the cast became unofficial ambassadors on what it meant to be Guido, and many of its subcultural elements suddenly became pop culture references, such as their in-depth beauty regimes, their language, their partying and dancing, which kind of harked back to disco, or their physical fighting, which kind of harked back to territorial street codes in the greases.
You can stay, get your ass beat. You can stay, get your ass beat.
Okay.
You can stay, get your ass beat.
All right.
Or their Italian-American identities. It's important to note that not all of the cast was Italian-American, but Guido and Italian were often used interchangeably, and Italian pride was a strong theme of the show. Reality TV had a kind of thing for Italian-American personalities in New Jersey at this time. Just think about the success of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, and so the popularities of these shows were kind of feeding off each other. But perhaps one of the most memorable aspects of the show was its aesthetic, which was nothing short of a sensation. After the show was released, apps were quickly made about how to aesthetically become a Guido or Guidette. The New York Times Magazine produced a Jersey Shore handbook. Clothing items from the show sold like hotcakes. The cast was sent out to do promotional material where they styled people as Guido and Guidettes, and many, many imitations of the aesthetic were in the media. Particularly imitations of Snooki, who was easily the most beloved castmate, and whose style was so notable it became the most popular Halloween costume in the USA after season 1. In short, the Jersey Shore aesthetic quickly became one of the most recognised of the decade, and it represented a new moment not just in reality TV, but also in the Guido subculture. While Guidos had consumed and reinterpreted broader USA culture for years, now it was the USA, and not just the USA alone, that was consuming and reinterpreting Guido. I'll discuss the broader implications of this later, but for now let's just deep dive into what it actually looked like. Clothes. So first let's get an idea of the style influences in the Jersey Shore aesthetic to contextualize the specific items. I've basically tried to classify these on the available research, however this is the first time anyone has tried to classify it like this, so just remember that. At the moment I can see 2 groups of influences on the aesthetic. Guido, reflecting style elements rooted in the subculture, and celebrity, highlighting the impact of the cast fame on the aesthetic. 3 influences I've noted within the Guido category are hip-hop, gym wear, and 70s disco fashion. Chicarico identifies several reasons why hip-hop likely influenced Guido style. Firstly, Italian-American youth in New York's outer boroughs coexisted with black youth, exposing them to hip-hop style for decades. Secondly, hip-hop's mainstreaming in the late 80s blurred racial boundaries, and Guido rap soon gained traction. In the 2000s, it was emphasized by artists like G-Fella and Jojo Pellegrino. Thirdly, Chicarico's work with Guidos in the 2000s revealed their idolization of mafia figures, which is similar to hip-hop's reverence for gangster figures. And finally, black street codes emphasizing masculinity and toughness resonated with the Guido street code. Sociologist Elijah Anderson notes that the street code often involves displaying a predisposition to violence through clothes, and acknowledges that this trend is observed in working-class Italian communities. For gym wear, Tricarico illustrates that the shift to suburban gyms in the 80s sparked the formation of many style elements among Guidos. With the fitness craze at its peak, a gym membership symbolized both affluence and adherence to broader American trends, and was a separation from working class identity. Consequently, workout attire was deemed stylish and was commonly worn beyond the gym, and we'll see many examples of this. Lastly, the influence of 70s disco fashion is unsurprising, given the Guido's background. As I've talked about before, disco-inspired fashion experienced a revival through the 2000s McBling aesthetic, but it declined around 2007 due to the recession. And by 2009, when Jersey Shore aired, many of its style elements were seen as tacky by the broader public, sort of out of touch compared to the more popular minimalist hipster-esque aesthetics. Given that the Jersey Shore aesthetic does take style notes from McBling, it might help explain why this aesthetic frequently got labelled trashy. However, as Tricarico notes, disco attire symbolised a social transformation, with flashy clothing indicating the attainment, or at least the aspiration, of higher social status. Amidst the stigmatisation of Guidos as lower class during the 2000s, retaining elements of McBling disco wear imbued them with symbols of American cultural consumption, synonymous with elevated social status. Two influences I've noticed within the celebrity category are affordable designer and individual style. Affordable designer clothing reflects the specific celebrity status of the Jersey Shore cast. Celebrities are often associated with wearing current trends and luxury designer, mostly because the designer is gifted to them to enhance the label's prestige. However, due to Jersey Shore's lowbrow reputation, many high-end designers avoided being associated with it, and that's probably why the cast mostly wore fashionable trends and designer items that were iconic in American culture, but with a more affordable price tag. Now this actually connects back to Guido culture, as Tricarico points out emphasis on wearing the latest trends and designer items challenges stigmas associated with any lower class status. Journalist Catherine Watson remembers this in her own experience of the aesthetic, whereby buying affordable designer was a way to convey a sense of having made it in America. These young people, most of them from second-generation Italian-American families, were raised the same way I had been, surrounded by the city life exaltation of brand name acquisition, distinctly American but also a bit new to understanding what being American might mean. Snagging a few statement pieces from brands that seemed higher end was also comparatively affordable, enabling kids with more working class backgrounds to achieve what they thought was an upscale look that was still within economic reach. The Jersey Shore cast frequently made reference to their love for trends.
Angry Birds. I'm officially addicted.
So there will be a lot of affordable designer pieces and styles in this aesthetic, ones that were super fashionable from 2009 to 2012. Individual style refers to the fact that the show featured 9 cast members, each with their own personalities and style. Snooki embraced a maximalist and occasionally scene queenish aesthetic. Sammy was more minimalist and refined. JWoww leaned a bit baddie, and Vinny even occasionally wore hipster outfits. In this video, I'll primarily discuss items that were common amongst all of them, but I will try to highlight individual standout pieces if they left a lasting impression on the aesthetic. Alright, let's get into specific items. Tops. One of the signature tops in the aesthetic is the skin-tight tank top, colloquially known as the wife beater, stemming from the mugshot of a wife beater in the 1940s. Historically associated with both violence and working class labour, they've also been adopted by hip-hop styles since roughly the 1980s. Tricarico highlights all of this when discussing its significance in Guido style, but he also acknowledges that in the 50s greaser subculture, it symbolised Italian working class labour, so much so that some still label it with an ethnic slur against Italian Americans. What's more, the top's ability to emphasise muscles was crucial for projecting physical dominance. First in the greaser street code, then in disco where fights would break out in clubs, and then later with the rise of gym culture in the 80s. Here, having a muscular body indicated that you were not only able to fight later in the clubs if necessary, but wealthy enough to afford a gym membership. With all of these stylistic codes and meaning in place, it's no wonder that the tank top was popular with Guidos, and the Jersey Shore cast likely wore them due to the connection to the subculture, becoming known as the shirt they wore before the club shirt.
And I got the shirt, but I ain't wearing the shirt when we go out. Just the shirt before the shirt.
And what is the club shirt? So it's basically their hyper-stylized t-shirts that the male castmates wore to clubs, sourced from various brands I'll discuss later. They often featured tattoo-style art and gothic motifs such as angel wings, roses, skulls, skeletons, crosses, and swords, demonstrating their love for street and hip-hop styles. They were also often embellished with bling, reminiscent of the McBling aesthetic, and frequently were V-necked, representing a super popular late 2000s to early 2010 style. I'll also note that female castmates wore versions of these tops too. Keeping these t-shirts fresh made up the laundry element of gym tan laundry, a beauty ritual of the male castmates that was frequently on the show. Jenny and Sammy's individual style often included a lot of McBling style tops, as in Jenny's underwear as outerwear styles, disco style cowl necks or tops as part of matching sets, and Sammy's tank tops, which were often from the same brands or covered in the same motifs as the club t-shirts and were kind of reminiscent of McBling tank top trends. And lastly, a central aspect of the show is that the cast worked at the Shore Store, a t-shirt shop on the boardwalk at Seaside Heights, as a means to stay at the house. The Shore Store became an iconic element of the show, and its t-shirts serve as key identifiers for the aesthetic, consistently worn by the cast throughout the series. Shorts and pants. The male castmates commonly wore basketball shorts and baggy jeans and shorts, both influenced by hip-hop styles. The trend of baggy basketball shorts in hip-hop fashion is mainly due to Michael Jordan. Until the 90s, professional basketball shorts were mostly pretty short and tight, until Jordan's preference for longer, baggier shorts transformed the standard, inspiring players like the University of Michigan's Fab Five to emulate him. This shift towards longer, baggier shorts continued, with inseam lengths growing to 11 inches by the 2000s. Basketball fashion and hip-hop fashion have always had a symbiotic relationship, given basketball's connection to street culture, black representation in the sport, and basketball players involving themselves in hip-hop and vice versa. Meanwhile, baggy pants gained mainstream popularity in the 90s after MC Hammer's Can't Touch This, which were initially inspired by Middle Eastern harem pants. They were perfect for breakdancing, one of the pillars of hip-hop, and therefore once they grew in this genre, oversized denim did as well. Given Guido's affinity for hip-hop styles, it's really unsurprising that they adopted these trends, and that they ended up in the Jersey Shore aesthetic. Tracksuit pants were another common choice among castmates, reflecting the fusion of gym wear and Guido fashion in the 80s. Tricarico notes that during this period, Guidos wore sweatpants rolled up or cut off at the knee, paired with extra long sweat socks. However, while tracksuits have roots in athletic wear from the 30s, Adidas's iconic tracksuit from the 60s became emblematic of hip-hop culture, particularly after the influence of groups like Run DMC. I'll also note that full-body tracksuits, especially from the brands of the club shirts, were also super popular, which if you ask me are kind of similar to the McBling Juicy Couture tracksuit trends. Dresses. Let's give Guidette fashion a little more time on this video now. Essential to the female castmates was an array of glamorous mini dresses to be worn to the clubs. A tradition as old as the Guidette itself was wearing extra glamorous and stylish clothing on nights out, especially in 70s disco scenes. Accordingly, Jersey Shore dresses were often reminiscent of the extravagant McBling era. They often had micro-mini hemlines, a trend on both dresses and shorts, which was common during McBling, influenced by 70s female liberation trends. They also echoed the opulence of McBling and 70s disco era fashion with one-shoulder, strapless, cowl neck, haltered silhouettes that were often blinged out. On the other hand, sometimes Jersey Shore dresses embraced popular late 2000s styles, like the bandage dress. Originating from Azzedine Alaïa's mid-80s collections, bandage dresses later gained prominence in the early 90s after Hervé Leger's bandage dresses were seen on many supermodels, labelled the sexy mummy look. BCBG Max Azria acquired Leger's brand in the late 90s and later released a capsule collection of the dresses in 2007. It didn't take long before it was common to see it everywhere on late 2000s to early 2010s red carpets. They also sometimes wore t-shirt dresses with similar motifs to that of the boys' club shirts, and often coming from the same brands. Accessories. Bold accessories, reminiscent of McBling and hip-hop fashion, adorned the Jersey Shore cast. For a more detailed exploration of these trends, maybe go and look at my McBling video. But these accessories included things like trucker hats, often worn tilted or backwards, very high heels or very tall boots to go with short hemlines, and then oversized sunglasses and wraparound sunglasses, all drawing inspiration from McBling's celebrity culture or reinterpretations of 70s disco trends. Blinged out diamond jewellery, especially with crucifixes and large hoop earrings, were clear nods to McBling, which often appropriated hip-hop blinged out jewellery of the 80s and 90s, and 70s black and Latino earring styles. However, Chicarico notes that in the 80s, Guidos and Guidettes also adorned themselves with flashy gold jewellery, often including crucifixes, as gold symbolised material status and class mobility. Similarly, diamond-encrusted hip-hop jewellery was often a bold display of wealth to symbolise a rise of economic status. Together, this suggests a possible mutual influence between Guido and hip-hop jewellery styles. Another popular jewellery item worn by the cast were rosary beads, likely due to their religious significance in Italian-American communities. Designer handbags were a significant aspect of the aesthetic, reflecting the McBling trend of statement it bags. While Louis Vuitton and Gucci were occasionally spotted, the most common bag among female castmates was the more affordable Coach handbag. Established in New York in 1941 as a maker of fine leather goods, the brand later filled a gap in the 2000s market for those seeking luxury without the high price tag. They launched a signature collection featuring a bold double C monogram logo in the year 2000. Later, this imagery suited the McBling logomania trend and, at a reasonable price, offered luxury to a broader audience. As far as I can see, Coach also was quite popular with Guidette fashion in the 2000s, and the cast likely embraced Coach for their Guidette sensibilities of designer at an accessible price point. Male castmates tended to wear sneakers with their outfits, particularly Pumas worn without socks or Nike Air Jordans. Originally introduced through Michael Jordan's collaboration with Nike in 1985, Air Jordans are arguably the most iconic hip-hop sneaker, having been worn by numerous successful rappers. This aligns perfectly with a hip-hop loving Guido aesthetic. A standout item was Snooki's diamond-encrusted sunglasses that seemed to obscure her eyesight. They were likely inspired by a common theme of McBling to bedazzle everything, but I'll also point out that the sunglasses obscuring vision trend was kind of massive in the late 2000s. They were first seen in the 50s, but popularised in the early 80s through music videos and professional wrestlers. Later, after Kanye West Shutter Shades in his 2007 Stronger music video, which were custom made by designer Alan Meekley, the glasses became a super popular trend in late 2000s club scenes, particularly because you could pretty much see out of them but no one could see your eyes, so perfect for rolling. I also noticed that wearing sunglasses in the club themselves was a super popular thing for the Jersey Shore cast. Maybe for the same reason, but this is just speculation. A really common accessory in this aesthetic was a high-waisted large belt. I know how dated this looks now, but trust me, this was everywhere in the late 2000s. It was a recreation of popular 80s trends, where shoulder pads that were used to create the illusion of a smaller waist were complemented by large, chunky belts worn tight at the waist to cinch in loose silhouettes. 2000s girls reinterpreted this by placing them right under the chest and or wearing them with tight items of clothing that were already figure-hugging, making them more of a fashion gimmick. But Jersey Shore girls were uber stylish for wearing this. Male castmates also wore big belts with their baggy jeans, a trend going back to Guido fashion, which I'm guessing also took inspiration from hip-hop style. Flip-flops with every outfit were a common sighting, which is unsurprising given they were right by the beach. And last, but definitely not least, there's Snooki's fluffy footwear. This included tall fluffy boots from the brand Bearpaw, seen in the 2000s scene aesthetic, largely inspired by Garu fashion. I'll cover this soon in a video on the scene aesthetic, but they were comically large and garish, and reflected Snooki's own personal style rather than anything Guido or McBling. And then there were her oversized slippers, which humorously matched her large stuffed animals and added to her sort of whimsy, especially as footage of her darting across seaside heights in them became iconic moments for the show. They definitely contributed to her individual brand identity, and she eventually created her own slipper line that sold out during an initial promotion on the Home Shopping Network. Interestingly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, these slippers kind of bore a resemblance to hip-hop sneakers. Hair and beauty. It's not always the case in aesthetics that hair and makeup is probably more memorable than clothes, but it's just one of the gifts of the Jersey Shore aesthetic. It's largely because hair was one of the most distinctive elements of the 2000s Guido subculture. One of the most memorable looks of the show, and on television more broadly, was Pauly D's blowout, consisting of blow-dried upright, heavily gelled spiked hair. The style is a version of the temple fade. a cut that's short at the sides and long on the top, and was used in the US military around the 40s and 50s. However, it was made popular in the 80s by black hip-hop styles, who wanted a change from previous generations of afros and jerry curls. Particularly on the East Coast and in areas like Brooklyn, afros were shaped into high top and flat top fades, and popularized by Cameo, Big Daddy Kane, and Eric B. and Rakim. Naturally, it made its way over to Italian-American barbershops, likely because of their love of hip-hop styles and its Brooklyn origins. However, it's also true that it was a hyper-stylized look that required real commitment. Chicarico notes that this was a key component of 70s disco Guido hair, where meticulous and time-consuming hairstyles were a necessary part of their look. He also notes the significance of hair gel in Guido culture, tracing its roots back to slicked-back greaser hair and the disco era, and suggests that the blowout aligns with these past generations' emphasis on gelled hair. Equally important to the aesthetic was Snooki's iconic hair puff. While mid-hair puffs experienced a resurgence in the mid-2000s, for the most part they were pretty much out of style by the time of Jersey Shore, although it wasn't completely uncommon to still see them. But Snooki's hair was much, much higher than those. Chicarico notes that big hair has been a historical component of Italian-American female hair since the 50s and 60s, particularly essential to the Guidette club hair in the 80s and 90s, where it was coined the buffed out style. Despite this, people were quick to ridicule Snooki's puff, which is unfortunately not an uncommon thing for Guidettes with big hair, as Chicarico notes they were stigmatized as tall in hair and short in brains. Sammy and Jenny typically opted for long, brown, straight hair, which is a super popular Guidette style and a historical symbol of Italian ethnicity. Streaked hairstyles were likely drawing inspiration from broader 2000 aesthetic trends like Scene or McBling, and likewise, Snooki's frequent use of hair bows may have been influenced by Scene or Garou fashion, though such bows were also popular in the late 2000s to early 2010s trends overall. Makeup was heavy. Heavy black eyeliner, heavy blush, heavy black eyeshadow. These were all signature styles. According to Chicarico, this reflects a long-standing tradition among Guidettes, especially with brightly polished long fingernails, which was another significant aspect of the cast's beauty regime. Snooki also had a preference for light-coloured lipstick, sometimes wearing concealer itself as lipstick, which was undeniably a popular trend of the 2000s. Tattoos were also a big part of the aesthetic, which links back to the Guido subculture, likely symbolising tough masculinity. But forget all that for a second, because tan skin, whether real or fake, was perhaps the most iconic beauty trend for the Jersey Shore cast. A key component of the gym tan laundry beauty regime, the cast often emphasised the need for Guidos and Guidettes to be tanned, and were seen throughout the show going to tanning salons or fake tanning. Chicarico tracks this trend back to the rise in gym culture of the 80s, where bodybuilders had a preference for tanned skin to accentuate muscles. Given Guido's love for displaying muscularity, it makes sense that they also loved tanning. The show became so synonymous with tanning that it's also been criticised as promoting it, and Obama even made a joke about them being excluded from the indoor tanning tax. And JWoww, Snooki, and Sammy capitalised on it by launching their own fake tanning products. On this note, they also launched their own fragrances, makeup, skincare products, just to give you an idea of how marketable their celebrity was. Other visual cues. Fabrics and motifs. If you think the mob wife aesthetic uses leopard print, let me grace you with Snooki. There's so much to unpack about this iconic print and its symbolism, but given the mountain of information I've already dumped on you in this aesthetic, let's just keep it brief for now. Since Paleolithic times, animal hides adorned attire. But in modern Western history, leopard print was once a luxury only known as a symbol of Africa or exclusive to the wealthy. However, by the 30s, influenced by animal motifs in Art Deco and Art Nouveau movements, affordable imitations emerged. Still, it was Christian Dior in 1947, likely inspired by his muse Mitza Bricard, who was the first designer to feature leopard skin in a collection, and therefore it was him who brought it to mainstream Western fashion. Since then, it has become symbolic of so many things, from bombshells to cougars, from rebellious subversions of femininity in glam rock, drag, punk, and more, to girl power, or from lower class to upper class. In the Jersey Shore aesthetic, it was a key element of Snooki's individual style and became a big component of her brand identity. I couldn't find any specific research on why it's popular in Italian American fashion, so I'm not going to make assumptions. But I will say this, No matter what other symbols are associated with it, you don't really wear leopard print to blend in. It's about making a bold statement. Just as leopards are powerful and independent animals, wearing leopard print exudes a fierce and striking feminine power. Other motifs included covering things with bling, a massive trend of McBling symbolising the flaunting of wealth and material status, and bright neon colours, which were pretty on trend for the late 2000s, early 2010s as a big 80s revival occurred, and it complemented the bold personalities in the Jersey Shore cast. Brands. Affordable designer brands such as Ed Hardy and Armani Exchange were super popular with the Jersey Shore cast. Ed Hardy was created in 2004 by Christian Audigier as a fashion and art collaboration with celebrated tattoo artist Don Ed Hardy. Audigier, kind of a pioneer of early influencer style marketing, used the same tactics of his 2000s mega brand Von Dutch, directly targeting celebrity clients and establishing stores in high-profile fashion districts. The brand quickly gained popularity, reaching over $700 million in gross revenue in 2009. As celebrity stylist Philip Block said, it provided everyday people with Hollywood edge, and Hollywood figures with street edge. For the Jersey Shore aesthetic, it was a brand that allowed whoever wore it to stand out and was unapologetically fun. Not to mention it held gothic and tattoo motifs that they gravitated to in other areas of clothing. Meanwhile, Armani Exchange debuted in 1991, offering Armani apparel with more youthful urban styles, and at a more accessible price point. Given Armani's iconic status in Italian fashion, wearing clothing from his brands likely instilled a sense of Italian pride that resonated with the Jersey Shore cast. The cast also loved Rush Couture, a custom t-shirt shop located at Seaside Heights that adorned many tattoo and gothic themes. Other brands with these style elements, like Affliction, were also super popular. After launching in 2005, Affliction gained deep roots in the MMA community, promoted a live fast motto, and was popular in other subcultures like motorculture, tattooers, and heavy metal. They also had a particular archetype associated with the brand, described by this 2009 article in the Bleacher Report, an undesirable portion of the population. They're aggressive, clubbers, bar hoppers. For Guido's, the brand was perfect for their maximalist t-shirt style, and its infamy and association with edgier subcultures was likely appealing too. With these brands also being a huge part of the Guido subculture, it's no wonder the Jersey Shore cast loved them so much. Just to give you an idea of how synonymous all of these brands were with the show's aesthetic, bars and clubs across America began banning people who wore them due to the show's notoriety. A nightclub in New Orleans even went as far as displaying a sign on its door stating, "If it's on Jersey Shore, it's not coming through the door. No Affliction, no Ed Hardy, no Christian Audigier, no exceptions." In other areas, Snooki was also a fan of Hello Kitty, a Japanese icon commonly seen in 2000s fashion, but Snooki likely drew inspiration from the scene subcultures of the era who also loved Hello Kitty. The icon has a history of being embraced by various subcultures, subverting its cuteness for alternative expressions. For other brand visuals, you could take a look at all of the cast's own business ventures, particularly their own fashion lines, like JWoww's Filthy Couture, Sammy's Fitness line, or Pauly D's Dirty Couture. Miscellaneous visual cues. Some other visual cues of the aesthetic are some of the gimmicks of the show, such as carrying a big stuffed animal like Snooki's beloved crocodile, or any comically large drink of alcohol, given the show's love for watching the cast get drunk, a duck phone, pickles, a note from Snooki and Jenny. The decline. In December 2012, Jersey Shore stopped airing. The ratings for the show dropped significantly in their final season. Many of the cast now had spin-offs that they were prioritizing. Snooki was pregnant, and the vibe was just a little more somber. Naturally, the aesthetic began to fall out of visibility too. Before that happened though, there was a number of critiques of it that are worth putting into this video as food for thought. As the fashion of the show and the behaviour of the cast was ridiculed globally, the show faced criticism from Italian American organisations for making the cast synonymous with Italian ethnicity. The head of Unico National, Andre Domino, urged MTV to cancel the show, citing it as a direct, deliberate and disgraceful attack on Italian Americans that would perpetuate negative stereotypes. However, Tricarico notes that these organisations had to grapple with the fact that Italian American castmates were proudly using the term Guido and Guidette to refer to themselves and their style. He says, Jersey Shore completely blew the cover off the secret that underlies the anti-defamation interpretation, that there is a youth subculture that calls itself Guido that not only claims to perform Italian ethnicity, but to be taking pride in it. He also notes that the Jersey Shore Guido was too immersed in the party culture to directly respond to anti-defamation politics, evident by castmate interviews who, when asked about the controversy, often took a what's the big deal kind of stance, that they were just having fun.
Like, what are you doing? If you want to make out with me, just ask. I will say yes.
Therefore, Tricarico says that Italian-American organizations are ideologically incompatible with youth subcultures like Guido, that are informally produced from the bottom, combining an ethnic minority group culture with new forms of ethnic agency. The former seek to engineer popular support from the top with a mainstream political strategy and a symbolic ethnicity, compatible with upper middle class adults. However, Tricarico also notes that the franchising of Guido by MTV, with all its style elements, wasn't without its problems. He says, as the premier merchant of cool, MTV was able to establish Jersey Shore as its own truth about Guido in the popular culture, regardless of the scholarship. He notes that reality TV thrives on subjecting subcultures to ridicule, and MTV maintained a tongue-in-cheek tone to the subculture and its style, selling Guido as uncool to cool kids everywhere. He claims that MTV encouraged consumers to adopt a Guido aesthetic provisionally, save for Halloween. At the same time, its producer, Sally Ann Salzano, who claims to have once been a Guidette herself, could come to the show's defense against these claims whenever necessary. Therefore, although Jersey Shore gained enormous recognition for the subculture, respect didn't necessarily follow. It's interesting to note what this did to the Guido style more broadly, as Catherine Watson believes that Jersey Shore dealt a fatal blow to it, as the notoriety of the cast fashion caused some of the brands to lose popularity, making it harder to sustain the look in real life. She says, while trends shift in every cultural moment, this active rejection of the fashion subculture was a sudden, reactionary one. When you find out that your hometown's signature look is somebody else's idea of a Halloween costume, it certainly hastens the end of those trends. By 2012, tailored dresses, closed-toe flats, and neutral colours had taken over the nighttime scene at the beach bars. The catalyst was the infamy of the Jersey Shore crew's outfits. Nobody wanted to look like that anymore. The show also faced criticisms for its portrayal of gender and how this translated to the aesthetic. Italian-American psychologist and professor Donna Chirico argued it perpetuated gender stereotypes, a position supported by Tricarico, who observed that macho, aggressive territorial behaviour and the portrayal of Guidettes as unintelligent and dressing for the male gaze was perpetuated by the show. I have to say, as I rewatched it for this video, moments of female objectification, slut-shaming, machoism, transphobia, and gender-based violence were pretty hard to watch. But I will point out that a 2016 study, Gender Stereotyping and the Jersey Shore, a content analysis, found interesting results regarding exactly how much the show portrayed gender stereotypes. Essentially, yes, male castmates were more likely to wear non-sexualized clothing, and female victim and male hero behavior tropes were present. However, a focus on physical appearance and performance of domestic tasks fell mostly to male rather than female castmates, and a bunch of other gender stereotypes were not even present at all. In April 2018, the Jersey Shore cast reunited for the Jersey Shore Family Vacation, a revival of the original series. The show has since garnered strong ratings, with its 7th season airing this year. Now in their 30s and with families of their own, the cast members capitalize on nostalgia by revisiting their iconic outfits from their wild 20s and paying tribute to them in their current outfits. This nostalgic appeal contributes to the show's success, as one of the main soft spots people have for the show is its aesthetic. It's kind of clear to me why. I hope if anything this video has given you an idea of just how iconic it was, or how rich it was in complicated yet fascinating symbols of Italian-American youth subcultures and 2000s reality TV culture. For me, personally, I think about what aesthetics were popular in the late 2000s and early 2010s, all these post-recession, hipster, minimal aesthetics, and I just love that there was something that was just unapologetically loud, maximalist, and completely itself. It's been a joy trying to understand this aesthetic, and I hope it's been that way for you too. Please let me know what you think about it, particularly if you're Italian American. Let me know how I went and if I've misunderstood anything or left anything out. Until then, I'll talk to you all again in the next video. Thanks for watching.